Welcome, everyone, to the L7C podcast. Today, we have a very special episode for you all. We have the long awaited return of Dr. Kassie Lowery. How are you doing today? Welcome back.
I am doing well, and it's been a pretty good day.
That is great to hear. That is great to hear. Was just looking. It's been a little bit some change since you've been on the podcast. One of your last episodes came out in March 26, 2022, when you were talking about the cultural
Oof.
impact of Sailor Moon, which was used recently as reference because the MHA enthusiast Andrea met Sailor Moon and she brought that up to her. So,
Oh, I
yeah.
did not know that.
Yeah, she used it as reference for her pod talking about Sailor and brought it up when she met Sailor. So that was one of the
Interesting.
last last ones you did back in 2022. You had that one, and then obviously the dating one in 2022, and
Has it
and you're
really been 2 years or three years?
from those ones, and then obviously you had the stuff when in 2021 about mental health awareness, Roe v. Wade that overturning in 2021, and then obviously your very first episode about CrossFit and feminism.
Oh, wow. Man, time flies.
It does. But now you are back for after popular demand, I might add you. And before we get into what we're talking about, you have to say something.
I do. So, since we're talking about mental health today, I just wanted to make sure that the information I share in this podcast is for educational purposes only and really isn't meant to replace professional care or serve as medical advice. Listening doesn't create a therapeutic relationship, and everyone's experience with ADHD and mental health is going to be unique. If something here resonates with you, I encourage you to reach out to a qualified provider for personalized support because you deserve care that fits you and is neuroaffirming.
That was very professional. Very
Thank you.
professional.
Thank you.
Like, did you just say that off the top of your head, or do you have that written down?
I had that written down. Are you kidding
Okay.
me?
Okay. Hey, it sounded like you've said it before, so I didn't know if it was just memorized.
I mean, I think lots and lots of podcasts that have to do with mental health tend to have something similar to it.
Mm, gotcha. But you have given the hint that we are talking about something mental health related. What are we talking about?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do quite a bit in practice and I myself have like experience with is ADHD diagnoses in women or in AFAB individuals, which means assigned female at birth. And I will put a little bit of an asterisk on that, saying that like some of the things that we talk about today can be true both of male, female, non-binary, gender fluid, trans, all of the above, which is why I want people to kind of like take it with a grain of salt. I have a hard time saying that everything is either strictly male or strictly female because I see it across the board. But really, with the like talk that's coming across with neurodivergence, I think it's important that people understand why numbers are increasing as opposed to kind of like having skewed opinions about why there are more people being diagnosed with ADHD.
Mhm. Okay. For someone who been living under a rock for the past, I don't know, a million years, what does ADHD stand for?
Yeah, so ADHD is called attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, or I mean, ADHD is typically how people will refer to it. People will also refer to what's called ADD. That's actually been a very outdated term, but will remain in medical records until probably the day you and I both die. However, when people talk about kind of like ADD, they're talking about ADHD predominantly inattentive. ADHD is also has another category that's ADHD predominantly hyperactive impulsive, and then there's the combined type, which is actually what people usually think of, which means that you have hyperactivity and impulsive or in inattention at the same time. So there's it's different terminology. The terminology will probably change again in another like 10, 15 years.
Hmm. Gotcha, gotcha. Now, with that, especially in the times we live in today, is that something that you get from birth? Can it happen over time? Like, how does one
Yeah.
get that?
So ADHD itself is a neurodevelopmental diagnosis, meaning that it is like it's genetic or it's hereditary, meaning that it comes through in terms of the way that your like biology is made up. Now, it's not 100% hereditary, but there's a higher likely chance or higher likelihood that you're going to have ADHD if like a parent or like a family member has ADHD. But ADHD at its core, like if we're talking about pure ADHD, that is a neurodevelopmental diagnosis, meaning that you're born with it. Um, People often talk about like adult ADHD, which is really not necessarily like different from ADHD itself. It just means that you didn't get diagnosed until you were an adult. Because the thing is like it would more than likely be like a head injury if you actually like developed ADHD like symptoms later on in life.
Gotcha, 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 gotcha. So then, for this particular one that we are talking about for today, we're zoning in on the ladies and ADHD. From
Yeah.
what I did, a quick little thing, I was seeing that it goes undetected more in girls than it does in boys. A, is that true? And then B, why is that?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why. And yes, it is true. I would say that generally, like you tend to see little boys get diagnosed with ADHD much faster than you see, even honestly, most little girls. But a lot of times, what I'll see is I'll see parents or like mothers come in and get their children evaluated. And then they go, wait a second, that's that's not normal because we'll be talking about like certain things that their kids do or things that they've seen that their kids struggling with. And I don't like the word normal, but I also would say like I've been told it's not typical, according to kind of like what the DSM says or like the Diagnostic Statistic Manual. Basically, that's like the diagnostic or like the diagnosis Bible for mental health.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times, like the reason that people or women specifically or AFAB individuals don't get diagnosed until much later in life is actually because of some like cultural norms that come into that picture. So like there's a lot of stuff that like kind of coincides for the reason why like women are diagnosed like earlier.
So, what age you typically? I mean, when you said that last part about earlier, how much earlier? Like, what age range are we talking? How it differs between the two?
So I recently looked this up because I think my statistics were kind of dated, and I'm guessing it was probably before we started to see this big boom, like I would say post 2020, of people actually like realizing that there are other people out there that think like them. And I think what I saw earlier was like age 12 is like the average age for a boy, and now it's saying that age 16 is the average age for like females. But until recently, my statistics had originally said like it was basically seven for males and like between 35 to 50 for females.
Wow, that's pretty like sizable difference. Like,
Yeah.
and this is, I guess, on record. Obviously, this has been around for a long time. Is I guess what if I was just a casual person just reading that and listening to this podcast now, then what would I think about like, oh, why, like, when did this first start? I mean, kids have been around since the dawn of time. This has been around for a bit. Like, was it just something in the households where it was just like, we're gonna take a seat back on that. Oh, she doesn't have it. He doesn't. Like, if we could just pinpoint the exact moment where there's such a discrepancy where it started, would that be even be possible?
So are you asking about like when did ADHD start or when did we like start to realize like, oh, we've been missing stuff for quite a while?
Missing stuff.
So I would say that like a lot of people are gonna there's a lot of conversation in like the general community about there's this big like wave of people getting diagnosed with ADHD.
Hmm.
And a lot of people are going to blame that on social media. And I would blame social media, but I would also not blame social media. Not because I think social media caused attention issues, but because social media, especially during the lockdown, like that was the only way that we could connect with other people. And the thing is like you can see these differences that kind of happen across time as like we become more connected with each other, that we start to go, oh, wait a second, that person thinks like me. Wait, they're saying that this has to do with this like diagnosis that they have. I'm going to do some more research into this. I'm going to find more people that have lived experiences. Because that's the thing is like, even as somebody who diagnoses ADHD for a living, I didn't get diagnosed until I was 31. And it made a world of difference. Like, I would say, like, historically, it's one of those things that I feel terrible for clients that don't have a background in mental health because even being a doctoral level individual with extensive research knowledge, I got pushback from multiple providers that didn't want to listen to me. Because there's this idea that if you did well in school, you don't have ADHD. If you have a PhD, you don't have ADHD. If you have a doctorate or like a medical degree, you don't have ADHD. And that's actually quite untrue. The thing is that those tend to be the people who you have more of that internalizing, and there also tends to be this blanket of anxiety going on. Um, so I think that's one of the things that kind of like, I don't know, it's becoming more apparent. People are really wanting to say, oh, well, like it's something that we're doing, but the reality is like we're just paying better attention to people's internal experiences as opposed to how they might inconvenience people around them. Because the DSM is really written towards kind of like middle class white like kids, like white male children. Because a lot of the things that are seen as abnormal for them are actually seen as culturally appropriate for like even a white female.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that we're getting better at like taking people seriously about how their internal world is existing, and there's just a lot more like talk and a lot more connection that's allowing us to do that.
So you brought up the big two words that have been running rampant probably the past decade up to the umpteenth degree, social media.
Yeah.
And now everyone who has an opinion on any of this stuff runs there and spouts it, and depending on how viral you are or whatnot, more people listen to it or more people see it. And I felt like that's really hurt, obviously, your field and like the medical field, because now everyone just thinks they know everything and make up stuff. What are, if any, what are some positives that social media has helped with ADHD, and what are some negatives that it has done to it?
So I am probably one of the like exceptions to the rule when it comes to my like stance from like the medical standpoint of my view of social media. In my opinion, if social media got you through my door to get you some help that you needed help for, I'm grateful for it. I always have a very frank conversation with my clients. I'm like, hey, if I like if this question that you have makes sense, I'm more than happy to like have that conversation with you. But like at the core of everything, my biggest piece is to make sure that people feel like they're being heard and that when they walk out my door, they feel like they have a little bit better of a like picture of what their puzzle pieces were coming in. Because I mean, at the end of the day, a clinician who you're working with, yes, has like expertise and like more information, but what they really are doing is like they take the puzzle pieces of you and you hand them to them and they help you put it together in a more like coherent picture so that you can figure out what to do.
Mhm.
And I personally feel like social media has allowed people to destigmatize a lot of mental health issues, especially ADHD. It also has helped people really understand like the struggles that go into ADHD because I think a lot of people either like think it's this completely debilitating thing and that you like can't ever function or have like a doctorate or like anything like that. Like you can't be a successful adult if you have ADHD is sometimes like the things that I hear from people. And then other times people are like, oh, it's just this like quirky thing that happens and like it makes you fun and spontaneous. And like, yeah, that can be true. But the reality is there's so much more that goes on behind the scenes with ADHD than just being like the quirky person. But there's also a lot of like strengths that go into it, whereas people see it as this like huge deficit. I will say on the flip side with like social media, if you don't know what you're looking for and you don't like take a an informed or like critical thinking stance when you're consuming social media, you can end up on the wrong side of social media and get a lot of really bad information. But the reality is like for the most part, at the end of the day, like if you needed to come in and see me, I don't care what got you through the door. I'm just glad that you're there. And honestly, by the time you come to see somebody for an evaluation, you're usually at the point where like you've done your research, you have a pretty good idea that like something's going on, even if it doesn't necessarily fit in that like perfect category that you expect it to be in. Um, and I think that what honestly, like ADHD is one of these diagnoses that I get frustrated with because A, it's the worst named diagnosis on the face of this planet. But it's also just like one of these things that everybody thinks that they know because we talk about it so often. And the reality is very little, like very few people actually fully know what it's like to live with ADHD if you don't have it. Because not everybody is a little ADHD. That's not a thing.
Right. And I think that thing that you said too, because I will even state that myself, like growing up, you really didn't hear of quote unquote successful people who had ADHD. And then if you did hear about it, it was some miracle that they were able to achieve what they were able to achieve. Where on the flip side, a lot of people have it, and a lot more people than you thought growing up have it, or and then they were successful, and it is something that you can perfectly still live a quote unquote normal life going forward. I think the thing with social media for me is that I do like your point about the puzzle piece. I think hearing that is really cool and putting it into that light, like, oh, they're here to, you got this puzzle. They're just here with the pieces, helping you with the piece. I think that's a really cool analogy for that. It's just sometimes people just go on there and don't know what the heck they're talking about. And because they have more followers, it gains more traction and sometimes keeps people out
Hmm.
of the hospitals. I can even give a, not from a medical thing, I can give a quick work example today. I had someone tell me that they heard on TikTok that Walmart is closing physical stores and going to go all virtual because of SNAP benefits stopping and they don't want people looting. And they heard that on TikTok. And I was like, that is not true. Yeah.
That's a good
So,
one.
yeah, I've heard that today. So, just the power that it has and how it can
For
sway
sure.
people's opinions, I just feel like is very dangerous, especially when it comes to people's health.
I would completely agree with that, but I would also say that that has very little to do with ADHD or like mental health specifically, and it has a lot to do with like the lack of like people don't want you to necessarily like think about things critically these days. And
Hmm.
anything that I tell you, I fully expect you to like go research it and figure out like, hey, like does this actually match up with like the experiences of other people? Does it match up with like um XYZ, like, is there research? And I wish that like the scientific method was much more kind of like, and it might still be, but like when I was in school in K through 12, like the scientific method was one of those things that got drilled into me from the time that I was, I think, in like fifth grade, like
Hmm.
hardcore. And like I still live my life by a lot of that. And obviously, like I'm in a, a professional like area. So like it's something that I have the ability to do. But honestly, like I think a lot of the reasons that we're struggling to get like accurate information is we don't really fact check people as well as we should. And quite frankly, like you're right, anybody with a platform can spew whatever they want and they're gonna believe it. That's also the reason that people still to this day think that like autism's caused by Tylenol or
Oh
circumcision
yeah,
or
that. Hmm.
vaccines. And I mean, as long as the day like I can be on a soapbox for the rest of my life about that. Because it's not true. None of those things are true. If you hear nothing else from this podcast, even though it's not related to it, autism is not caused by vaccinations, Tylenol, or circumcisions. At least not in like the broad picture of things. It's a genetic diagnosis. It's neurodevelopmental, just like ADHD is. Um, but again, like those are the types of things that like one person started the vaccination thing,
Hmm.
recalled the research study that was completely fabricated, and we still talk about it.
Hmm.
And there's no research to support it. And so like those are the things that like drive me batty. The other thing about like social media, I think that it can definitely like keep people, you were kind of talking about like keeping people out. And I think that like this social media trend has really soured people, even like in the mental health professional or like in the mental health profession, of like having this like very biased opinion of anybody who comes in is like an adult saying, "Oh, I think I have ADHD." And they're like, "Well, why?" And like every person that ever tells me that it has to do with like social media is always so meek and like awkward about it. And I'm like, I
Mm.
whatever got you in here, I'm fine with. Like you can have that conversation with me.
Hmm.
Um because the thing is like there's a lot of good stuff on social media. You just have to know how to check it.
I think that's the hard part, the
Yeah.
knowing how to check it, because obviously the way the algorithm and all this stuff is, our brains, we're in the microwave society. So it's like, all right, the first 30 seconds, that's what we're really into and that's what we're going to take. But we're not going to use like any time to be like, oh, I just listened to that for 30 seconds. Let me do my own research. That usually stops because we're going to literally the next video that's posting on our thing and gets our
Yeah.
attention. So,
I mean, you're going to a cat video next, so
yeah.
but I think that that's one of those things like I will say the vast majority of people who come in and have that conversation with me and like have that meek like awkward interaction, they go, "Oh, well I heard this and then I like did like extensive research." And they're like, "Well, I started thinking about it and like this and this and this and this." And the other thing is lots of these people already have diagnoses. They don't have ADHD diagnoses, especially females. Females are usually going to get diagnosed with depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and sometimes borderline traits. 9 times out of 10, it's ADHD. Not for like depression and anxiety, but when we have bipolar or like borderline coming up, which are a lot more stigmatizing for folks, even though, like, again, it's just a different way that your brain works. Um, People really struggle with that idea that, like, oh, well, like this woman is like ups and downs. And that's kind of why I was talking about like it's ADHD is a terribly named diagnosis. It is an executive dysfunction diagnosis, meaning that like the doing is really hard. Nobody has, truthfully, like an actual deficit in attention. They have a deficit in regulating their attention. It's basically like the equivalent of trying to like a person with ADHD is going to be drinking from a fire hose at all times, whereas everybody else in the world is drinking from a glass of water. Because you don't get to like filter any of the unnecessary information out, which is why people like have such a hard time harnessing the information that they actually need.
Hmm.
The other thing is your brain chases the thing that is the most interesting or the most novel because you have typically a dopamine deficiency, which is the thing that makes you feel good and gives you motivation to do stuff. Um, and so like what ends up happening is it's turned into this idea like, oh, well, you just don't try hard enough. Like the kids that get told repeatedly as children, you're not living up to your like your potential. You're not trying hard enough. Why did you do that? Why didn't you think through it? Like their brains literally wired differently. And that's like the thing that I think drives me bonkers is because yeah, like by the time you get in for a diagnosis, your kid probably like your little girl's probably anxious. She's probably depressed because she's also heard like 3 times as many like negative statements about why she just doesn't try hard enough. And I mean that's even more when we're talking about like um anybody like of a different race or from a different culture or like
Hmm.
literally like it compounds it so much and it's so frustrating.
Yeah, I would say with the different culture thing, that's obviously a big thing that I've experienced through experience because there's just some things where it's like you just don't believe it exists. Like
Yeah.
that's a big one that I've seen firsthand where it's like, oh, that thing doesn't exist. Oh, that thing doesn't exist. You just need to do X, Y, and Z and it'll go away and things like that. But now I think it's gotten better over time. But if you take it 20 plus years ago, oh no, like,
Oh yeah, I mean the majority of people that I see are people who were born in the 80s and the 90s.
hmm
And in like the early 2000s because you didn't girls didn't have ADHD then. Like you
hmm
had to be bouncing off the walls in order for somebody to pay attention.
hmm
Um, the kids, I mean, and little boys as well, like that just were more of that inattentive kind of presentation. And I say inattentive presentation because 9 times out of 10, when I'm going through diagnostics, it's going to be a combined.
hmm
Like most of the time, the difference is that a lot of people, especially as you get older, people will say things like, oh, well, like adults don't have ADHD, they grow out of it. No, they don't. They get better at hiding it. They're
I've heard.
less inconvenient to you.
hmm
Because a lot of times it's the fact that your brain never stops running. It's the fact that you're restless and you don't actually know how to rest. It's the fact that like being in quiet is actually too loud. It's the fact that like you can't find anything to save your life. I call it the black hole. Sometimes I set stuff down and it just randomly reappears in a completely different place, or I can't find it until somebody else finds it for me. And then it's usually in some embarrassing spot because I wasn't paying attention to where I put it. So, I mean, I think that's the big thing. The other thing that I think is really like kind of screwing with this idea that we're overdiagnosing ADHD is because people think that everybody that is like thinks that they have ADHD, their only like reason for doing so is because they're drug seeking. I have news for you. If you have ADHD, more than likely, you're not going to get the same like 15-hour like cleaning spree that somebody who doesn't have ADHD does and takes Adderall. Like people take, I mean, we all know that people take Adderall like during college and things like that. Like those are probably the times that you will expect most people to like be short on their medication. Um, the people who don't have it are going to be able to write like reports or like papers for like 15 hours at a time. Your friend with the ADHD, you're going to be lucky if they remember to take it. And if they did take it, they might get the dishes done.
hmm
And that's what that is. And meds aren't the answer for everybody by any means, and they're definitely not the whole answer for anybody. Um, but I think that that's one of those things that like that's why ADHD specifically gets this bad rap is it's this idea that it's like gonna lead to addiction and other things like that. And you're like, actually, if you look at the research, being diagnosed earlier is actually going to more than likely prevent addiction issues later on. Um, which I think is something that like again, we don't like to really like look at the whole picture sometimes. We just like to look at like one piece of it.
hmm
And that's where we lack kind of like understanding those things.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, with the people that I work with their who have been addicted to the umpteenth degree, none of them so far in my couple years have never said that um ADHD or anything like that was the reason that led them to the path they're on. And some have told me they're like, oh, if I found it out when an adult, maybe if I found out back then, I wouldn't be on this path. But obviously, that's something you can't prove. But the fact that they're aware enough to say something like that shows we're having progress. Because again, if I was
Yeah.
20 years younger, like I didn't hear any of this stuff. I only thought I'm trying to think which there was like certain cartoon characters who now as an adult I realized that they had ADHD, but then back then when I was a kid, I was just like, oh, they're just crazy.
hmm Well,
So,
and what's funny is like if you, I'm gonna actually jump back to the thing that you were just talking about with addiction real quick.
mhm,
The thing is, like we look at it research wise, people who are medicated early on and have ADHD are much less likely to actually develop addictions because they're not seeking ways to quiet their brain. Whereas people who get diagnosed later in life are usually the people that you see that have substance abuse issues. They have trauma. They've done things that are like way too impulsive that have caused like issues. Not being diagnosed with ADHD will actually shorten your life. Like
Oh,
it will legitimately cause you to be at a higher risk for dying earlier because of impulse issues. Um, and I think that's something like we think about like ADHD as this like again, lots of people think of it as this like quirky thing, or is this like you're just not going to amount to anything. The reality is like it's not true. Like a lot of these people are actually very high achieving. The problem is they're trying to get their brains to be quiet, which is what leads them down these pathways. I think there was a study recently that actually like pointed out with like severely obese adults who were going through like a some sort of like treatment. Turns
hmm
out that 50% of them were undiagnosed ADHD because when you have undiagnosed ADHD, you also tend to seek out sensory things, and eating is one of the most passive ways to get dopamine hits. It's actually one of the only ways that you can kind of like passively get dopamine,
hmm
um, which makes it, again, like ADHD tends to be one of these things where it's more all or nothing. Um, so like you might have somebody that then it looks like they're manic because they like all of a sudden have gotten like 12 hours or like 12 days of work done in like a day. But
hmm
like for the next 3 weeks, they're not going to get anything done. Um, and that's frustrating because again, like people with ADHD know what to do. It's just it's almost as though they've had this lobotomy and like not necessarily lobotomy, but kind of like you've split the brain between thinking and doing and they're not talking. And that's actually an analogy that came from Russell Barkley, who has been like the head or like the forefront of a lot of research for ADHD. But it's this idea that like I know exactly what I should be doing and I can't do it. Like it has nothing to do with being lazy. It's the fact that like task initiation is literally a symptom. Being able to get things done is literally part of the issue. And then if you start to get something done, you then get sidetracked halfway through it. And then all of a sudden, you're like, we call it Roomba cleaning, where you like run into something, you bounce off of it, and you end up doing something else.
hmm
And so, like, if you're cleaning the house, your house is a little cleaner at the end of the day, but nothing's completely done, which is also frustrating.
So we've made improvements from like 20 years ago now, but like going forward, what things would you want to see improve with maybe diagnosis, maybe in treatment, care, medicine in this regard of ADHD, especially in ladies? Like, what would you want to see improve in, let's say, the next 10 to 15 years?
There are so many things.
List them
Um,
off.
well, I mean, I think that that's like so at the basis of this, like that's a much bigger question, I think, than we can ever cover in a podcast. Because the reality is like somebody who has a uterus is automatically already at a disadvantage when you go into a medical field of any sort, including mental health. Because the reality is like ADHD is one of the longer studied drugs in terms, or not ADHD, Adderall is one of the longer studied drugs in adults. And one of the things that's just fascinating is the fact that like your menstrual cycle and the way that your cycle like runs can actually impact how well your like medication works.
hmm
We've had Adderall around for decades and nobody has figured out how to fix it so that it works better for a female body. Um, which is mind-boggling and also just like right, like the thing is, again, we've talked about this at the beginning here, but like it's a very the medical field is very focused on how do you inconvenience the people around you rather than how does this actually like affect me as a person and how does this affect the way that like I get to experience my life. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that we've made in terms of like jumping, and I hope that we continue to see those like big jumps. Um, honestly, I think we were on a really good trajectory until recently in terms of like embodying like what mental health is and things like that. I'm concerned that in the next couple of years, like we're gonna see this head in the wrong direction very quickly. As somebody who deals with insurance and as somebody who has been watching the news, whether I want to or not, health care impacts whether or not you're gonna get mental health care. Um, and that's unfortunate. because the reality is like we were headed in a really good direction. And now all of a sudden, like it's something that people see as like a luxury being able to go to therapy. It's something where medication shortages happen. I mean, we saw lots of medication shortages during COVID. Um, and I think that those are the things like I would like to see us honestly just continue on the trajectory that we were pre 2025. And then also like being able to understand like let's be more mindful about how we talk about people that think differently from the rest of us. Um, because the reality is most of the people that you really like watching on TV and most of
Mhm.
the TV shows that you watch are full of neurodivergency. You just don't know it because it's not labeled.
Mhm.
Um, because the thing is like I always have this conversation where like neurotypical people or people who don't have these like diagnoses versus people that are autistic or ADHD, they both have places in society. Like there's a reason that they both exist. Neurotypical people tend to do really well with like structuring things and keeping things on track and like getting us from like maintaining basically. The people who are neurodiverse or have a different way of thinking are going to be the people that shake and move the world forward. They're the people who discover new like ways of doing things. They make things more efficient. They they tend to be a lot of like artists that people really love because those people are passionate and they think differently.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, you'll see a lot of them like there's a lot of people that come out and they're like, "Oh yeah, like I am diagnosed with like X, Y, or Z." And the thing is, I think a lot of people see that and while it's trying to kind of like normalize it, people are like, "Oh, well like if you're not like a rich person, like that's not a thing." And that's just it's not true. Um, so I think that that's kind of like I'd like to see us continue to like go down the rabbit hole of like neuroaffirmative care, meaning that like we're not trying to quote unquote fix people. We're trying to make life more accessible for people that think differently. And I think that like one of the big things of that is understanding the cultural impacts of how these things kind of like impact people because I kind of alluded to this at the beginning, but the reality is like as a female, it's considered appropriate and desired for you to sit down, shut up, and like be nice and compliant.
Mhm.
Whereas like when you were a little boy, that's not considered normal. That's considered like, oh, why are you withdrawn? What's wrong? Um, and then lots of the ways that we kind of like that females especially cope with some of these ADHD tendencies is we overcompensate. And then what ends up happening is that we look super anxious or we look like we're super depressed or we are because like we basically have to manage all these things constantly. But the other thing is like when we again, there's like 5,000 things that I could go on forever about this, but
Oh.
I think that one of the things that just like is so important to understand is like not having emotions doesn't make you bipolar.
Right.
Um, having emotions also doesn't make you borderline,
Right.
but also ADHD is something that does actually get worse depending on where your cycle is. And there's a lot of women who make it all the way to like perimenopause and menopause before it like gets to the point where they literally cannot manage it.
Mhm.
Because the thing is like you basically lose the guardrails on things, and then what ends up happening is all your coping skills, you're too freaking tired to deal with them anymore. And I mean, it happens with men as well, because men also go through hormonal changes and you'll see things change for them. But I think that's the thing that is kind of funny about why we're also starting to see all these like big booms of these diagnoses. It's because I have news for you. Usually, once one person in your family gets diagnosed, you start looking around
Mhm.
and you go, oh, wait a second. Mom and dad weren't just like ignoring my issues. They didn't think there were any
Right.
because everybody else in the family works the same way. And you know what? Surprise, there's more diagnoses. Um, but again, like that's also something that I think we could improve on with like adults is trusting people to know themselves. because there's also this aspect of like certain people won't diagnose it unless you can like get corroborating
Hmm.
data from like family or from teachers or from somebody else. And I'm like, but more than likely, if you're at school and you're anxious, like you're not going to show anything anyway.
Hmm.
Because your teachers aren't going to see that you pull all-nighters, which I didn't find out until I was in my 30s, wasn't normal in college. Lo and behold, turns out it's actually not supposed to be as normal as it was when I was doing it. Um, well, I mean, you know that because I was literally up all night and like you're up all night because you've just functioned differently. Um, but that's one of those things that like you also attract people that are like you because they're the comfortable people. And so like these things never get brought up because the people you surround yourself with also happen to be in the neurodiversity world. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like I regularly have conversations with mothers specifically. I'm like, just because you're the most functional in the household doesn't actually mean that you're functioning the way that like theoretically you're supposed to.
Wow. Wow.
Um, you're just holding it together a whole lot more. And I think that that's also part of this issue is like sometimes people are like, oh, well, if they can like mask, that's a popular word, and that's not something that's just ADHD or autism.
Hmm.
Masking means that you cover up the things, like you don't show other people. So like me pulling all-nighters, that's how that my teachers didn't see that I was struggling. That's how they
Gotcha.
didn't know that my like executive functioning was crap. Um, but like because I could mask, nobody even mentioned it until I think I was 28, and then I laughed it off for another 3 years. And I finally sat down and I went, oh, I'm like actually not anxious anymore because I was in a good place. And I looked around and I was like, uh-oh, I still can't get anything done. So it's not the anxiety. And I ended up going through each of the diagnostic criteria and being like, okay, well, I meet this and I meet this and I meet this and I meet this. And since I got diagnosed, I have other family members that have gotten diagnosed. Again, everybody takes their own journey to get there. But that's like the thing is like, I hope at some point people, and I think this is changing as like we're in the field right now, but like having somebody come in and tell you some of the things that are bothering them, you shouldn't meet it with resistance if it comes from social media. You should meet it with curiosity and you should meet it with being open to questions and having like answers to help them if you don't diagnose the thing that they think they come in for. Like, I don't diagnose everybody with ADHD or with autism that comes in and tells me they think they have it. But you know what I do?
Hmm.
I do assess them for it.
Gotcha.
And I do have a conversation with them about, okay, well, like, if this doesn't fit, like, why doesn't it fit? And why does this other thing fit better? Because at the end of the day, regardless of what you come in thinking you have, my goal is to make your life better when you leave than when you came in. And I think that the other piece of that is like people think about all these like positive things when you get diagnosed, and especially for people who've been fighting and like don't get it until later on in life. But there's also a lot of grief that goes into that. There's a lot of people that look back and they're like, man, if I just would have known, kind of
Yep.
like you were talking about with the substance piece.
Hmm.
And I think that we really miss the mark on that sometimes. Like, I try to make it a little bit more of a conversation when I'm doing feedbacks with people. But like, it's frustrating. And the other thing is like, I can't even tell them that if they'd come in sooner, that it would have made any difference. Because the reality is like, until recently, we weren't like doing a super great job at like paying attention to people that are from like any minority group. Um, Which again, that's a larger picture problem, but I just rambled. Sorry.
No, no, you're
I do
fine.
that.
No, you had I mean, a lot of good things that you said about the progress that has been made and what needs to be made. And long story short, there is a lot that needs to be made for future generations and things of that nature because we don't want the progress that has been made to just go backwards into the abyss and start all over because no one needs to invent the wheel twice, pretty much, is what I
Yeah.
can gain from what you said.
Yes. I mean, I would really like to not have to reinvent the wheel, but we'll see what happens.
And then there's this quick thing I didn't want to ask about another
Mhm.
thing that keeps evolving technology. Has that helped in diagnoses and all that? Because technology evolves every 5 seconds.
So I think that's a complicated question. When you say technology, do you mean like the technology to diagnose people?
Yes.
So I think that like it's still, I'm sure that they're making like larger strides where we can't see it at the moment. Um, because the thing is like there's not really anything that like technology wise is going to tell me that you have ADHD like quicker than like what I do does.
Hmm.
There are certain things that might show up like on brain scans and things like that, which is great in theory. But the other thing is like there are a lot of people who will also go and get these like brain maps done.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that brain maps don't have a place in the world. They're basically considered like quick EEGs, or like we jokingly used to call them like the poor man's EEG.
Hmm.
Um, and you can pick up on some stuff with that. And like you can definitely see differences when like people are on medication versus when they're not. But the thing is like there's still it's still pretty rudimentary when it comes to it, because the reality is like I'll get these like 100-page printouts from people and I look at it and it'll be like this person may have this and this person may have that. And it doesn't do anything on its own. Like it's not super well like formulated. It's not super well siphoned down to like what we're actually looking at. And I think that people in this field have gotten a little concerned about like AI.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that AI is a good tool. I think that AI should never replace clinical judgment, and I think AI should never replace therapy. And I say that as somebody who loves technology. Like, I am a big proponent of technology because it makes my life easier as somebody with ADHD. Um, but at the same time, it doesn't take into account factors outside of itself. Um, and I think that that is a big piece when we're talking about like not only technology and social media and AI, like AI is not meant to be a therapist. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't experience breaking up with a boy. It doesn't experience breaking up with a girl. It doesn't experience a divorce. And somebody had actually talked about like it. One of the reasons people like AI for therapy is because it removes the relationship or the burden of the relationship.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, but like at the core of being trained in therapy. And I'm not even a therapist. Like I'm not a big therapist. I deal mostly with numbers, but at the core of everything, the biggest predictor for therapy, do you know what it is?
Nope. What is it?
It's whether or not you feel like your therapist can see you and you can trust them.
Mm.
It's 80% of what is going to cause you to actually make progress in therapy. And that's an old statistic. It might be a little bit different than that, but like when I was training, that is what we were taught is like at people just need somebody to know that somebody else cares about them. Um, and I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, like I pay you to like care about me." And the reality is most of us still go home and like we don't just stop thinking about our clients. Like like even somebody like me who does assessments, sometimes I'm like, oh, I wonder how that turned out for them. Or I wonder like if they're doing well or if they like need something new. Or I think that's the thing is like ethically, we can't like be friends with our clients.
Right.
But
Right.
there's a reason for that because A, we don't want to be super biased, because otherwise like therapy is just it's a sacred space that you're supposed to be able to unpack and like not feel pressured from somebody else to be somebody that you're not, because that's where you're supposed to be able to be who you are in your like most authentic form and not be judged for it. And I think that that like you just yes, can you get non-judgment from a computer? Sure. But you also like miss out on like getting feedback and getting checked in place when like you do something that's probably not super bright. Because the thing is, like, we all do it. We all have emotions. We all react impulsively at some point. And the therapist just looks at you and is like, I know you better than that. Like, what was going through your head when you decided to do that? And
Yep,
then we
yep.
unpack that. So, yeah, I mean, like, I think, again, I think there are places for technology. I think there are a lot of places that technology is hanging out in right now that really it shouldn't be doing.
That I agree. I agree with that. Cassie, anything else? You've hit on a multitude of different topics within the main topic that we were talking about. We went through a lot of different branches from social media. Now we just talked about like technology and AI and all of that, and what could be done better in the future. Anything else you want to hit on while we're still here talking?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, if you are somebody who thinks you have ADHD, I think it's okay to go out and to, like, have a conversation with somebody who's qualified to do that, to have an assessment and to like have that conversation. I don't think that you have to immediately. I think that it's something that requires a lot of like investment and time and thought. And I also want to be very clear that you have to be careful about who you go to for an evaluation, which is something that like hopefully at some point I will have enough energy and time to like talk about. Um, because that is a big piece for me. Like sometimes there are people who are going to tell you like unequivocally that you can't have X, Y, or Z because of this. And I know that it can be really easy to just stop and be like, all right, well, like the doctor said that I don't have this. Now, I'm not saying like go to like 10 doctors that all say you don't have it. Like there's probably truth there, but be intentional about like what wording you're looking for when you're looking into like finding out if you need to like if you qualify for a diagnosis. It's also okay to self-diagnose. It's just is different in terms of what you get access to.
Hmm.
Um, because like there are certain things that you like have to have an evaluation in order to get access to it. But at the same time, like making sure that you're looking for somebody who's a neuroaffirmative assessor, which means that they're not trying to say that this is wrong with you. It's just a different way of your brain thinking. Um, going to therapists that are neuroaffirming, going to people who like regularly see females or like adults for ADHD evaluations is a big one. And just like looking for some of those like red flags. Honestly, like if you do a little bit of a deep dive in terms of like just Googling, like, what should I be looking for in an evaluation as a woman, as a person of color, as somebody looking for like help in XYZ? The internet is a great place. You just have to
Hmm.
make sure that more than one resource is going to tell you the same thing. Um, and preferably not Wikipedia pages because anybody can change those. Um, but yeah, I mean, like social media is not all bad. Like there are some really good influencers that I think like do a fantastic job at sharing information. There is one on Instagram that I really like that she's actually got a very similar story to my own because she is a neuropsychologist that her she didn't get diagnosed until she was probably around the same age that I am.
Hmm.
Um, and I can give you her name, maybe. We'll see. She's the like ADHD neuropsychologist, I think.
Okay, okay.
I can send it to you. But I mean, paying attention to people who like have a clinical basis in these things is also really important, and knowing kind of like how much of like do they specialize in this area? Do they have it themselves? Because sometimes like it can be really helpful to have somebody else who like has walked the walk already.
Hmm.
Because there is like there's a big difference between people who like went to school, like I myself included. I went to school and obviously I didn't figure it out until much later in life.
Right.
But then I started hearing people like that were females or women that were older, um, telling me about, oh, well, like, yeah, I went and I like this, and this while I'm evaluating their kids. And I went, wait a second. I thought that that was all just me like being super anxious. And there are people who have been doing this longer than I have that have like know what it feels like to have ADHD versus like what the diagnostic criteria says. Because the
Mhm.
diagnostic criteria, again, are based off of not females. Um, so I think just being intentional, which is always a struggle bus, but um, also, the last thing I think I should tell you, because this is hilarious, because this is not going to come out until November now, is that October is ADHD Awareness Month.
Look
And
at
I might
that.
have done that on purpose at this point because I literally always forget that, and most of us actually forget. There's somebody that has a theory that the reason that ADHD Awareness Month is October is because the color is, well, it's October and the color is orange because they wanted to make it as easy for people with ADHD to remember as possible.
Oh,
And
okay.
yet we all still forget. Thing is like we don't have memory problems, but like if it is not interesting enough to like stick, you're probably not going to remember it. There's a lot of times people feel like they have complete like memory. I'll have people come in and ask me if they have dementia and they're like 20.
Oh,
I'm like,
Jesus.
No, you got the ADHDs.
Jeez. That's funny. That is a good
We're a
point.
funny bunch.
Oh, yeah. I mean, very much so, and continue to be a very funny bunch. And like you just said, day of recording is literally the last day of the month, so it won't come out until November. But the thought was there and things of that nature. So
There was intention.
there is intention. There is intention. So that's all that matters. Cassie, again, it was good to have you back. It's been a very, very long
Yeah.
time. And then your first one back, just dropping a lot of gems and knowledge. And I'm sure for the people who do listen to this will find something that they didn't know. I mean, just doing this with you, I learned a whole bunch of new things in about the hour, close to an hour that we've recorded. So I'm sure that this will
We
enlighten
might
some
end
people.
up we might end up with another episode at some point because this is like the tip of the iceberg.
Well, I'm all for starting a series on this because it has been very, very, very informative.
I enjoy my job because of that, because I get to learn lots and lots of things about a lot of different people. And I get to help them. There's nothing better than having a moment where somebody goes, "Oh my God, you just described what my brain does." And I go, "Yeah, probably because mine does the same thing."
That's true. You are in a very, you can probably relate more than other people can because just like you said, your mind does the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was never somebody who like I thought it like a lot of people did. And a lot of people do, especially when you have a doctorate, because there is this idea that like if you're successful, like there's no way you could have like
Hmm.
this thing that they said like the kids that like didn't behave had. Reality is like a lot of people in higher education have these things. We're just very, very, very much taught to be ableist. Meaning that we like internalize a lot of the stuff that society tells us is wrong with us.
Hmm.
But honestly is the reason that like we have innovation and we have new things that happen.
True. We just got to keep on innovating, keep on innovating. With that being said, thank you everyone for listening to the L7C podcast. Make sure you like, rate, comment, subscribe wherever you listen. Hopefully, we do not have to wait a potential 2 to 3 years again until Cassie is back. Hopefully, we make it a lot sooner than that. But that is the goal going forward, especially in 2026. And with that being said, you guys take care. Happy Halloween. And Cassie will be back before a 3 year span. Take care. Thank you for listening to this episode of the L7C podcast. Be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.